Okay, so we're recording. Ready to go when you are.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rich Leonardo from Defense and Energy Systems. I'll work out of the Youngstown Business Incubator. I'll be joined by Aaron Quinlan from Valley Solar and our other partners on this project, the gals from Hudson Fasteners. We apologize they couldn't make it this afternoon. So our concept is a solar and powered bus enclosure to be located, if the city in Covelli agrees, right off to my right to your left. If you look out and you see beyond the concrete, there's a grass position over there. And when we have events at Covelli, there's often a lot of people who wait there and gather as they try to cross the street or wait for rides or wait for transportation. So that is one of the areas that we thought would be a great spot for our Empower structure. And I'll give you the 5 W's, and then Aaron will go into the details about this. So what we envision is a solar-powered bus stop, if you will, that could have, even though the theme is green infrastructure, it could power the area lighting, be tied into signals, and not within the project cost, but if we wanted to include it, a kiosk for wayfinding around the city for restaurants or the university to advertise events, things of that nature. So we could take advantage of the thousands of people who come to the Covelli Centre and infuse the past and present about Youngstown during that moment. So that's really the focus of the project. And the budget of $20,000 allows us to do some pretty good things with traditional solar panels with the backing off of them. You can see a rendition of a panel that is more clear versus some of the darker panels, and we have the option on that for the roof structure. We envision the structure being 3-sided, given the weather that's here. The slope would be to the south. As we look out over here, that's that direction. And the open front would be towards the street. And the artwork would be embossed along the sides of the panels of the structure, as well as potentially integrated into the castings for the bench where people could sit or they could stand. In terms of tying into Youngstown, Youngstown State is the 2nd university in the country to get a very large format 3D sand printer. Currently, well, Youngstown Business Incubator finishes building 5. That printer is now located at a Columbiana Port Authority industrial site, and the printer is being run by Hometown Products. So that large format printer prints sand about the size of that table, and that sand is used for molds. So you could do very unique geometries, artwork, or so forth, but those molds are used for castings. Now that ties directly to Youngstown's past, and our thoughts are that we could use those castings on the ends of the benches, or as well as the pillars to support the 4 corners of the structure. And we still have more discussion with our art team, Chris and Lisa at Hudson Fastener, on how we integrate those castings and the challenge of price point to make sure that they're durable and yet affordable and meet the code requirements for the structure. So that's a little bit of the overview of tying together Youngstown's past with the celebration of us having that 2nd sand printer in the United States to demonstrate what is possible when you integrate technology into a manufacturing area where 3D printing happens. I happen to manage several 3D sand printing projects on behalf of the Youngstown Business Incubator, and also for entities like Special Operations Command, where we build very unique geometries using these types of tools. Valley Solar has been in the business of solar for a long time, and I'll brag a little bit about Aaron and Dan have helped in the past do a lot of community efforts to include Tour of the Valley. It was a bicycle event that they had, and then when they gave it up, it kind of died out here recently, sad to say. Chris and Lisa from Hudson Fastener often get involved in Youngstown things. They help to do manufacturing day, and we thought they were a good complement to our more pragmatic approach in terms of the technology and the structure and integrating artwork. However, we're probably going to contact the new professor at Youngstown State. I just met him. We haven't had a chance to talk about this project. He does some 3D printing, and we need to get some more ideas and cost pricing discussions about the artwork that would be integrated in the structure if it moves forward. So that's kind of a quick overview, but I'm going to let Erin talk more details.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, pretty much, as far as the concept goes, we envision the structure. As you can see, it's just kind of a sample structure of a similar, overhead shelter. We envision the solar panels, like Rich had mentioned, basically covering the sides, to where we can kind of, take our engineering and maximize the amount of solar that is brought to that area, so that we could do the most with it. The potential that this has, as far as technology and providing that, the pragmatic and the actual dynamic of this structure, not just the artistic look of it, is to possibly do some cell phone charging, like a charging station, different little lighting. There's lots of different options that we have that we would basically look at, again, to the budget to see, this is probably the best for what the community could make the best use out of. So a lot of those details, the panels and then the batteries to help, store that. We could be powering some of the just different things that are happening in the city, the lights, the traffic signals. We'd like to be, and to show and also do a little bit of education with our technology and, letting the residents, not just those coming into the city, but those that are actually in the city utilizing this technology as well. We look at, I know we were going to just try to touch on kind of where the budget would be spent. We've put a copy of that into the actual handout that you have. And primarily we have a lot of the engineering that's involved, the design work of the actual structure, and then we have mostly the labor and the materials, mostly the technology, solar panels, batteries, and the construction of it. We've really tried to look at the preliminary design to basically make it as least permanent as possible. So this is something that we could put anywhere, essentially. It wouldn't have to be just here. It's basically can be accommodated and could be reproduced into other areas of the city as well. But other than that, so that's the concept and what's behind the budget. Looking at, like Rich had mentioned, just trying to tie in that old Youngstown with the new Youngstown, and just showing the old with the new and the new technology, and really showing how Youngstown is just dynamic in their thinking and their approach to not only technology but also the art. So. Yeah,
and the other part of the budget we think is key is not only the panels, and I loved the last project. I got really excited about it as well as you. But we wanted to integrate batteries so you had redundant power during the evening hours so that people could charge cell phones, or if we could get YSU to agree, it would be great to offer free wireless there too. That's one of the challenges in the city. If you go up to MIT or you go to some other universities out west, the integration of the city and the universities are often done in these areas where there is free internet. And folks will sit outside, businesses and so forth, and it allows an integration opportunity. We could see an integration opportunity if you imagine out there the crowds sitting in this structure. If the weather's a little off, the batteries would provide the power because you wouldn't have enough juice at night for lighting and wayfinding. But imagine a kiosk going across the front that says V2's is having a special on one of their great dishes. Youngstown State is having this musical event during the Christmas time frame, and you have enough power for those things, but also charging of personal devices. And it would be neat to see a wireless infusion there. Of course, for this project and that budget, we can't pay for all of those things per se, but that's why we want to have batteries integrated, and then we have to ensure that they're not perforable and that the structure will hold up with the weather, and some of these components are valuable. And you have to be realistic about how you integrate that in a community where we might not have surveillance all the time. Because folks, we want to make sure it looks good all the time, and that the outputs from it, in terms of the energy, the lighting, and so forth, is available when we think those peak hours are. So that's part of the design. It would be, and we have not done this yet, vet this with the city as well as the Covelli Centre and look for some cost share art behind it. It would be unique to have somebody throwing a kiosk. It would be very neat to see the community businesses see that they want to tie in and make messaging, or have some startups decide that they want to get involved in marketing around that and hit some of the other themes that INPLACE has. What are your questions?
I'm curious, in the handout here, and you have on the left-hand side the bottom picture and the picture in the middle, why are you showing those and how do they relate to this specific project? I mean, especially the design in the middle. Is that something, is it just a reference of things that have been done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what I
similar
thought.
without
Yeah.
going through a full design. We're like,
Yeah.
our concept
Yeah.
was a little bit unique in the fact
That's
that
what I thought, I just wanted to.
yeah, so this is like more like the base structure, like
Right.
kind of like what we would do just for something simply solar.
Mhm.
But then to get the artistic side of it, that's kind of just giving you the view of what maybe the panels might look like from atop, but also kind of from underneath the
Mhm.
shelter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then a lot of these are just showing you the different materials that we would like to use.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure.
In doing our research, one of the things we found out is that you'll see designs where we could do peak to paint, or we could do flowers or things like that. What we didn't think about this is that it would be very practical in terms of giving people shelter,
Yeah.
giving our climate. And so, a roof line's a roof line. You could make it nicer by using transparent panels, but it still needs to serve as keeping the water and wind off of occupants
Right.
while they're waiting. And so, to be honest, we have to somehow go from this into this and use the artwork around the frames inside and integrate it into the structure to get that. Yes, ma'am.
And you said this was going to be lit?
Yes, it's easy to
And
do.
Could some of that aesthetics be created with different colored lighting or something?
Yes, and that's why we really wanted to have a discussion. Lisa and Chris are great about thinking about the metals aspect, but we wanted to talk to the YSU professor and get a little bit more ideas around the ability to do more artistic work with the lighting and the feel and view that you would get under there. And that's what we're lacking on this team. We have not had those discussions yet.
And so you don't have like an artist or designer lined up yet to work?
Lisa has done artwork before, and it talks about some of the design work that she had, and so they're representing that on the team. But we want to make sure we have the right experience on the lighting. That hasn't. She was open for us to find additional feedback on it, because once we engineer that in, we have to make sure the batteries are sized appropriately and that the system functions from an engineering standpoint, especially in cold weather when the battery capacity is going to be much less. Sir?
I just have one more comment. As somebody who rode the bus for a year, without a car and rode the bus for a year, I always sort of looked at these shelters, which are, for lack of a better word, pretty shitty.
Yeah.
And they're just, when you're riding the bus, like to have something that was a little bit more beautiful, especially at night illuminated, that they sort of had this presence, because it's hard. I like the idea of having like a stronger space of shelter. I also like really pumping up the aesthetic of this, because in this town, public transportation is seen as something that's only for the poor.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I rode the bus, I can't tell you the people who were like, "I'll take you home. You don't have to ride the bus.
Yeah.
I'll take you." And I was like, "No, I'm cool with this."
Yeah.
Because I lived in a bigger city and I rode the subway, and I've always been thinking about how do we make, my brother sits on the board of WRTA. How do we make this? Because there's so many times. I've just moved in Youngstown. I have a car, but I'm probably going to start accessing the bus more because I'm on a major route close to downtown. And this has been constantly on my mind, and I would love to see, especially these, I'd love to see it as a prototype that becomes fully fleshed out and sort of, that almost would make you want to ride the bus.
Right.
But it would, so it would be something from a distance as well as close
Right.
up.
Right,
Right.
exactly. And that was my mention of, we could have it in multiple locations.
Right.
As you could see in the city,
Right.
there's multiple locations that something like this could be utilized.
And I think it gives the RTA service a physical presence other than the buses.
Right.
And you know, I'll say to like jump in at this point is that to think that art or design or whatever doesn't mean that it has to be quite screaming. That actually maybe a super well detailed, beautiful thing that it gets lit at night, etc., might do the job. Because at this point, you know, the design does not mean necessarily having to do something completely funky. Or it might just be that it's a beautiful solution. You were mentioning kind of the things that this need. There's a certain kind of functionalism to what you were trying to say. But if it does those things super well and it just does what it needs to do, and that these things themselves become art, and they could be super simple, super beautiful lit. So that also the art doesn't just come in and just get stuck on the sides. That could also be, that could be an interesting way to go about it. That could also be something that feels stuck on, instead of having this thing be a designed beautiful object that
Architectural.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for this.
And I mean, I think
that's a
just
great
to
perspective.
build, as excited as I was about the previous project, what I sort of like about this is that it really serves a purpose. It really serves, and I think in a lot of ways, it's such life enhancement for some people who ride the bus that are economically challenged. That, you know, I can tell you, riding the bus can be a brutal experience just in the facilities or the reality of it. And I sort of like the idea of speaking to like an underserved population and making their daily life better, but also then sort of maybe prompting people who would never consider riding the bus, thinking this may be a way to go.
So are there minimum requirements for bus shelters? Like, there must be. I know you have to have if it's enclosed, the opening has to be a certain size, and I guess that just changed not too long ago. It's bigger, but what else?
There would be more permitting, but you're right. So WRTA needs to be a partner, and we haven't matured enough to contact them and fully build in what the requirements are, because the idea is that this concept would work anywhere, so we want to hit all those requirements. There's also the local permitting that Aaron had worked in with the city before on, because to make sure that it sits back enough from the sidewalk, it doesn't block any views when you pull it in and out in terms of ingress, egress, and then the structural components for wind loads. Well, a big thing with solar panels is the structural wind load component, and that's where we have an architect that we work with on a regular basis to make sure those type of compliance things that are for code, and every city is different, to be honest, and every county is different, and so those are the aspects that change a little bit depending on where you place this. The neat thing is, if we showcase it here in Youngstown, it could take off in, say, Columbus or Cleveland, but we would have to make sure zoning compliance happens everywhere.
And you have that factored into the budget? Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the way we looked at, we had to, of course, do some initial little bit of engineering behind the scenes, kind of just make sure that a structure like this, like you said, with permitting, it wasn't going to be too. And the way we, looked at in just our discussions with some of the engineers and architects is making it to where it's not necessarily, and when I don't mean not permanent, but we're not digging holes in the ground. And it makes permitting a lot easier. It's not really as invasive, and it makes it to where it's simply a structure that's sitting, in a grassy area or wherever we may deem it. So the permitting is very minimal. And really, the terms as far as, is it on an exact bus stop? Maybe not. Maybe it's just somebody, maybe it's not for just bus, riders. Maybe it's for just pedestrians crossing the street, or somebody who just wants to get a little bit of shade in the middle of the hot summer, or a little bit of shade in the winter time. So that's kind of some stipulation we would have to look into, whether it's, and that's not necessarily always on a bus route per se, but if we can make it scalable and make it to where it can be practical for that same use even down the road.
So potential project partners, the City of Youngstown, the Covelli Centre, WRTA, and Youngstown State's Art Department really can do a little bit more discussion on aesthetics. So Any other questions?
All good?
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much.